Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Halo Vepi, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Vepi, oho. Suukon kirsikka silmät.
Welcome to another adventure of the Gloucester Bookies. We're already jolly with each other here. Susanna Natty, Professor Raymond Hildenon, and Wayne Soini here to give you some ideas and recommendations for or against books. We sometimes have books we say, no, don't waste your time. But there's usually or conditional recommendations, like you have to like this kind of book in order to like this book. But we'll find out. But it's anything to do with books, writing books, reading books, borrowing books from the library, and selling books, rearranging them on your shelves, and throwing those things, giving them to the charity, everything to do with books. But I have an announcement. Yesterday, I finished a complete draft of my long-awaited true crime nonfiction book with Rob Fitzgibbon. That's a co-author, which we've called Rockport's Main Street Murder.
Oh, excellent. That one.
All right, that one.
Whoa.
And those who attended FinFun heard Rob and I talk about the circumstances and issues of that murder investigation, an unsolved crime. And some people in the audience gratified both of us with comments that they hoped we would write a book, and when they heard that we were researching a book already, they said something like, I can't wait, and please let us know, and so forth like that. It indicated there was some interest besides ourselves writing this. So we've completed yesterday the first, the complete book. Subject now, you know what you do when you write a book. Revision, subject to revision, yes. Often radical revision, such as now. It's an odd situation because we have more words than we need. We have 62,000 words, and the publisher wants 50,000 words. So it's usually the reverse, like you have 40,000, and how am I going to do this? And this one is like, what can we throw out?
It'll be a better book.
And it will. It always is a better book when you delete things.
Yes.
Tighten it up. It's beautiful.
Yep.
All right. And it's also better for the reader who says they don't have to turn those pages to get to something interesting. Isn't it true? All right.
Although, aren't there a lot of authors who really rebel against that? Apparently, recently, that 50,000 word count is becoming a a must.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what you shoot for, 50,000?
Yeah. And a lot of the some are saying, well, that limits my artistic expression.
I think Barbara Streisand's recent memoir is over 1,000 pages long. So she couldn't have been told, hold it down and delete something. But I think she put in recipes and everything else. But don't worry. Today we have some concise books. I think I have the largest book here. It's on Leonardo da Vinci. But you have several.
I've got a couple.
And you have several. And none of them
We've all got thick books.
No, really, they look concise. Not overpowering.
I was actually going to ask you, Wayne, when that's a thick book.
Yeah.
But my copy is bigger than that. That's not abridged, is it?
I don't know how they did
My book is bigger than your book.
They ran it through the shrinkometer. Right? Yeah. And we go, let us do it this way and start off with Susanna Natty's books that she's brought to talk about. And please.
Okay, take it away, Susie. All right. Well, it's there's so many ways I could sort of enter this, but I just want to segue off what you were saying about the book you have just finished writing the first draft of. I ended that. That is with a preposition. My seventh grade
That
English
is
teacher
something
would
with
be
which
very,
I will
very
not
mad.
put up.
Yes. Because people do want to solve the mystery. And that's why, true crime, and cold cases are always so interesting.
Yes.
And so I'm therefore going to segue immediately into one of the books I'm in the middle of reading right now, which is called Shakespeare Was a Woman and Other Heresies. It's by Elizabeth Winkler, who is primarily a journalist, and I have never really concerned myself much about Shakespeare and his true authorship or not. I knew vaguely that there was a lot of hoo-ha about maybe Francis Bacon was the one who wrote them, but I really haven't paid any attention. And lo and behold, one of the Christmas gifts I got this year, we're taping this in January, so I've got a stack of books this big, and this was in the stack. And within the first dozen pages, I was absolutely riveted. And
I love that.
I won't tell you what conclusions she draws, but I will tell you that there seems to be not only plenty of evidence that it may be someone else, and a dearth of evidence supporting the claim that the man from Stratford upon Avon, who was a Glover's son and actually did act in London, that he was actually not the author of all of those wonderful plays and sonnets. I mean, the thing that has fascinated me most is that underneath all of this roiling controversy out there, which I was completely unaware of because I had never really tuned into it, and I'll tell you, passions run high about this topic. I brought it up in the sauna last Saturday, and one of us said, "What?"
How exciting.
It became a heated controversy.
It became a heated conversation, yes.
Oh, I wish I had been there.
But what's so interesting is that they're sort of tied in with Shakespeare's importance was notions about British Empire and the supremacy of English literature, and at a time when religion was sort of subsiding as a major force, the humanities was rising up higher or in people's consciousness, and the humanities, the king of it all in English humanities is Shakespeare. So people have, people have a lot of skin in this game who study, and the Shakespearean scholars, some are the Stratfordians who are promoting that our idea of Shakespeare as that man from Stratford is the correct one, are lined up against the anti-Stratfordians. And let me tell you, the shots are being fired. And she is a terrific writer. I think sometimes she's taking maybe a little bit too much glee in skewering the powers that be, but it does seem to be parallel to something else that goes on right now, has gone on for centuries, which is that once you have staked put your spear in the ground, it's very, very hard to give up what your belief is. And that's, we're seeing that in spades in our world right now.
Are you talking about stubborn Finns?
Oh, I'm talking about humanity in general.
Humanity in general.
Yes. But this is a great sort of almost benign academic example of that kind of, we're not going to be budged. Don't show me the facts. So anyway, I highly recommend it. It's one caveat, it's a little bit of a dense read. It's not like a scholarly work, but I think on that spectrum between a really easy read and scholarly, it's inching over the halfway line toward I can't skim this. And partly that's because I find it so interesting.
Do you mind, that's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure Wayne agrees. There's been some recent talk about the feminist approach, the book Hamnet, and which talks about his child and his wife. And then, but at the same time, there's been some very excellent biographies that really do seem to pen Shakespeare down to his environment and place him at strategic points in his career with the publication of these plays. which I found, Will in the World was one of such a book, which I
Yeah.
found very convincing. I don't know, you must have some comments, Wayne, because you're a great Shakespeare scholar.
Well, I end up on the Stratfordian side, but just for simplicity's sake, although I've studied, such as Susanna with the book that you have, you must have had five times to a page mention of Delia Bacon. Delia Bacon, a woman didn't. Well, you'll run into it. This is good. This is good. It'll work.
Will tell me if I don't have it right.
Delia Bacon, in about 1850 or so, came to the belief that it wasn't Shakespeare. It was
Yes. Oh wait, she
Francis
figures
Bacon.
prominently in here. Okay, good. Yes.
Francis Bacon. So she ends up going through what clues exist in the manuscripts, the surviving plays of Shakespeare, and finds these various reasons to believe that Shakespeare left clues, because in the Elizabethan time, I'm sure they say this,
Yes.
a lot of people did amateur cryptology. They
A lot of
made
anagramming and
anagrams and
hidden
codes and clues, and people would figure out, everything's a puzzle in intentional message buried in between the lines. And she felt that it was pretty clear that Francis Bacon had left behind these things. I think one trouble with Francis Bacon was he died before the plays were all written.
That would be a problem.
But
yes.
but that's explained.
But some were published later. But we won't
that
discuss
was
that. But
no, that's explained by there was a trunkload of unpublished, completed but unpublished Francis Bacon plays that were then used again. And why? But then of course you say why didn't he just? He loved writing and he loved putting himself out in the public. Why didn't he say, Hamlet by Francis Bacon, instead of say, hey, you over there, bit player, come over here and I'll use your name as my ghostwriter. Why would you do that?
Well, apparently it was customary then. The nobility did not.
The gentleman did not.
The gentlemen would not be
dirty their
involved
hands
in,
with
in
theater.
So how does that tie into Shadow's Child?
It has no tie-in at all.
One other thing, because Raymond, the out there, people that want to, I'd like to read, say that they're conventional and they believe Shakespeare was Shakespeare, oddly enough. Then I'd like to read about, authentically about, not about Shakespeare. I want to know about his wife, his fabulous and interesting Anne Hathaway, Shakespeare wife. And it turns out there's a wonderful book, pretty old, but you can get it from the library. Germaine Greer, the pioneer feminist, picked out of her subjects and researched like crazy the story, the biography of Shakespeare's wife. I've forgotten the title. Germaine Greer, you can find it. It'll be obvious. It'll pop out at you like Shakespeare's wife or something. That is the title. It's a wonderful book, really a great book to say, I'd like to know a lot more about Shakespeare's wife. And the more you learn, the more you admire her.
It's hard to put up with
the
genius.
less you admire William Shakespeare. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Anyway, I do highly recommend it. And I will tell you that the subtitle, which I should have read before, is terrific, is this: How Doubting the Bard Became the Biggest Taboo in Literature. See, the whole establishment out there. All right.
But anyway.
So that leads me to, I was going to touch a little bit on book clubs, because I
do it.
Keep on sort of like circling around that topic. Maybe we've already discussed it a little bit in our sessions here. But the rise of book clubs was also part of this great surge of the humanities, and it was a safe place for women to discuss intellectual things.
Yes.
And it made the men feel safe because, they're just talking about, books. And it was actually a lot of the early book clubs were sort of seed beds for, civic action as well. So that there's a lot of history to book clubs, which I'm not going to go into. I'm going to instead give you some interesting factoids about book clubs, because my time is ticking and I can see what I'm going to do. Did you know that there is a women's book club, maybe by now it's co-ed, in Illinois, the Women's Reading Club of Mattoon, Illinois. and met in 1877 to discuss ideas. And that book club is still running.
The same people?
Not the same people.
It was like the
I'm
Red
sorry to
Sox.
say
The
that,
players
but
keep
it is
to be changed.
the longest running book club in America. Do you remember the Book of the Month Club?
I remember.
Yes. Did your family subscribe to the Book of the Month Club?
For a time.
I remember my parents getting those boxes of books, and then later on, I subscribed to Book of the Month Club. It was a way to keep your shelves, loaded, and that was instituted in 1926.
Yes.
In 1950, there were 500,000 households that were signed up for Book of the Month Club. Let's hear it for reading.
Which meant if you were the author and your book was picked, you'd
Oh
have
my
an
God.
immediate sale of
It was like,
500,000 books.
exactly, because they would have the recommended one that would go out. I mean, it was a precursor of, Oprah's book club and
Right.
Reese Witherspoon's book club and whoever else is doing book clubs.
I have to interject.
Oh, good. I can see you.
Because I ran myself into debt because of the Book of the Month Club.
No.
Yes. And so my mother cut me off. Because I was interested in reading, but not so much interested in paying. And I think you had to pick one, and if you didn't pick one, they sent you two or something like that. So
I think there was something like that
So
to catch people like you.
yes, and they certainly did.
Oh my goodness,
Right.
that is funny. And then I thought, well, are there book clubs outside of the United States? Because I don't know if they started here or there were things like that going on in other places. But I remember asking a French friend quite a few years ago, have you ever been to a book club? And she said, no, what is that? And I thought, oh, well, maybe there's no book clubs there. But I think it was just her neighborhood, because there's a book club in Paris which has 6,000 members. Now, I don't quite know how that works.
Yeah.
Because I went online to look at it, and there are pictures of people assembling. I think maybe they have subgroups or affinity groups or something, but that's a very hefty book club. Have you ever been in a book club?
Yes, depending on your term for that.
Yeah.
But especially in France, the salons, they actually existed before books were really even published. Manuscripts would circulate. And one such book was discovered in the possession of Anne Boleyn, and was a part of her trial, that she, even though in the beginning, the court was for the Protestant ideas expressed, but then when it came time to trump up charges against her, that was used against her. But also Diderot's Encyclopedia's articles circulated. So you're right, it's a tremendous source of ideas.
Yes.
And the idea that women weren't included is not true.
Oh, good. Yeah. Wow. So were you in a book club?
Many over the years, including one in Spain, Historia XVI, which my Spanish wasn't that good, but I was able at the University of Madrid to guide some pupils who were studying American history and the English language prior to coming to the United States to study a year abroad. And I realized that it was just for history book, but it was wonderful. And I had to, it was hard for me to keep up because I had to read them in Spanish, and I wasn't totally bilingual.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
I really enjoyed that.
So were you leading the group, or you
yes.
were?
A leader.
Wow, Wayne. Raymond.
Yeah,
Wayne.
the University of Madrid. Yeah.
Wow.
I remember.
That's
Raymond,
so cool.
I thought Raymond, I messed it up. He said, I misunderstood. You studied for a year abroad.
Yes.
I thought you studied abroad for a year. But
No.
Go ahead.
I couldn't be accused of
Next
that.
one.
All right. I'm going to see if I've got one more interesting factoid for you. Oh, yeah. This was the good one. So Finland, of course.
Oh.
There is a silent book club for book lovers in Helsinki. I love this.
What do they do?
People get together and enjoy some beverages and read silently
I
together.
heard that.
I love it.
Yeah,
Already.
that is so finished.
That's great.
And so booky. I love it. So with that,
Yes.
I cede my time.
Okay.
Well, we
So-
may return to you. It depends on what we.
All right.
So, is that included in your Saturday afternoon bacchanalias at the
No,
sauna?
no,
Because
I'm afraid not.
I did hear that from my grandfather via my father, that some people would sit and read the newspaper or a book in the sauna.
As it got soggier and soggier.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be tough.
And I can vouch for
built-in
that
fan.
because rummaging through the ruins of the Finnish Club on Langsford Street, that I found stacks of newspapers piled in the outhouse. Stacks. Huge stacks. As you said, rotting away.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You always had something to read. Yeah, that was good.
Wow. Okay.
As you have things to read, tell us about your reading.
Well, okay, I wasn't sure what I was going to do today, but it's really interesting how some of what I has ties in with some of your comments and even some of your preliminary comments. But I was really interested in two books that are currently or recently on display at various libraries, Sophie Library, Rockport Library, Ipswich Library, dealing with history and how suddenly history, world history, as opposed to individual histories, are suddenly the vogue. And these two books are Empire, A History of the World, which...
Anyway, hold on. A History of the World. Tell us the pages, because people are going to be amazed at how short this book is.
Yes.
I can tell from this.
200 and, I mean, this is amazing
what?
that
Before the-
248 pages. The
248
history of the
pages.
world in
History of the
240.
world.
Now, the reason I took this on was because this is absurd. How can this be? The other is...
And this is on display in a number of libraries,
Yes,
local
and
libraries.
the other is, this one still has the new tag on it.
Oh, wow.
And this one is from the Soy Free Library also. The Rest is History.
I love
which
that title.
is, of course, a play on, The Rest is History, from ancient Rome to Ronald Reagan. But this one takes about 350 pages. But still, I'm annoyed. So I'm
Is
going to
this by
start with this
one-
one. I'm very
one-
annoyed with this book.
One
because-
author?
Why?
It's from the podcast by Tom Holland and Dominic Sandbrook. They have
Right, two authors.
a podcast. They, as you just did, and this is the tie-in, so it's wonderful, they gave a page or two or three at most to any over 100 little topics. But I'm not annoyed. I get annoyed with that because I don't. It's supposed to be funny, and maybe some people would find it so. Like how
call that-
pigeons won the war and lost the peace.
I call
How to
that-
make an 18th century British roast beef. Tales of the Round Table, the long afterlife of King Arthur. But all these topics are covered in a page or two, and a lot of them are not true history at all.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that structure, I call it the lily pad structure. Like a frog leaps from lily pad
Oh, really?
to
There's a
lily
name
pad.
for that.
Because there's no, by me, that's my name.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then,
Okay.
and it's like here's the pond of world history. You could go through it from beginning to end, which was done by this other author. These people just said, no, not everybody's interested in the whole thing in a summary. They don't want a survey. They want the little tidbits of fun. And this guy felt
yes,
that
but
these two
the
people
annoying
said,
thing is, Wayne, is they don't care if it's true or not. And that's my objection to this.
Yes. Well, if you
types
have
of-
the
Yeah.
truth and you have the legend, you print the legend.
So they don't acknowledge at all if it is
Yes.
fact or fable.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so this is like the world we're dealing with AI.
Well,
Yes.
this
And,
is the,
including one which it was really interesting, which was 10 reasons why to get what do we owe the Persians? In other words, after 500 years or so of history, what do we owe the Persians? This is a lead-in.
Yeah.
I could have. That's a topic. That's a wonderful topic, but they gave it one page. But in fact, this is annoying.
what do we owe
That,
the
no, let me finish. And the Empire.
What do you
I
owe the
figured
book
that
club? Book of the month club.
What it's 10 things that the Romans owe us is actually, they didn't even get this right. That's a famous historical study. What did the Romans what did the Romans ever do for us? And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. But I wanted to explain, okay, so the real interest for me in the empire, this book has really captured the attention of a lot of readers in Europe in particular.
Was it translated? Is that what
no, this is written in English by Paul Strathern.
No, I mean the Europeans are reading translated editions of this.
I don't know.
All right.
And I assume so. I don't think it's translated, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So this book actually also at first annoyed me that it was going to be like just a bunch of little gag, not a little historical. Because how, as you've already alluded to, how on earth can you pile 5,000 years? Essentially, that's what they covered. Yeah. Although on one page, he covers 100,000 years in one page of human history.
Oh, thank God.
The rise of Homo sapiens in one page.
Yeah.
So I thought, how can this be? And I really thought that part of the popularity of this book was due to two other books that he wrote, which were used in part a very popular HBO series and other Netflix series. One is the Borgias, Power and Fortune, and he wrote a book on that. Yeah. That's the name of his book. And the other is the Medici.
I saw those.
Which is Power, Money, and Ambition in the Italian Renaissance.
Right.
But I stand corrected. This book is magnificent. It reads like a prize-winning novel.
Wow.
But it is fully substantiated. It's just a wonder of detail, though, that you would think could not be interesting, that he piles in so much fact, but he ties it into each generation of the Borgias. So, to tie in with this book, I was annoyed because I thought, not having read this book yet, I thought that these programs had been criticized, the Borgias and the Medici, had been criticized for their tortuous twists of history, and the way that they twisted the facts of history. But in fact, this proved that I was wrong. But also another recent movie, Napoleon, and I mentioned this movie was getting very good reviews until it was reviewed in Paris Match and another French leading newspaper, and it was criticized for taking great stretches with the truth of Napoleon from the book Napoleon in Egypt, also by Paul Strathern, and in which they actually put two characters, create one character out of two, including two generals of Napoleon, and also, so I thought, well, what good can this book do? Because I just heard controversy. But in 248 pages, I can't believe how much is thrown in and how well written it is.
So
now,
this
I don't
is by
agree with Paul Strathern, Empire,
okay.
A New History of the World. And his idea is that the current world is made up.
The Book of the Month Club is calling you and asking about this money.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Potential spam.
Our records show that you owe us $20 from 1967.
So I thought that how can this book possibly do justice to such a theme that modern civilization is more dependent on empire than on democracy? Like a lot of us have this idea that Greece and even Rome, as it borrowed from Greece, this is in the Judeo-Christian ethics, so to speak, have more to do with the current world than empires and conquest and blood and gore. But it's really interesting. Now, when I tell you that he distills 10 different empires, the Akkadian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Arab Caliphates, the Mongol Empire, the Huan dynasty, which I'll get to in a moment, the Aztec Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, the Russian Empire, the American Empire. I'm exhausted. How could you fit all of this into 240 pages? But somehow he manages.
Wow.
Okay.
This sounds amazing, and I think I really want to read it. I mean, it sounds like it has an overarching premise. That
It's very easy to read.
Let me,
I'm going to read something.
that's what I'm asking you.
Yes.
Okay.
So people understand if this is really the kind of book they want to read, read a paragraph, whether it's selected or random, and let them feel the flavor of the text that you're talking about.
Well, as I will do that in a second, but one of the apropos that idea was that the book is very controversial also because he takes two very controversial ideas and almost presents them as fact. Some of you may remember that the Australian Prime Minister recently was objected to the Chinese premier in Sydney, saying that the Chinese actually discovered Australia a long time, like 500 years before the British did. Well, in fact, that's what he says here. And so Admiral Zheng He had been in the service of the Emperor Zhu Di and was captured as an adolescent and castrated according to contemporary custom. Consequently, this young man rose through the ranks to become a man of mighty stature, both politically and physically. Eyewitness reports describe him as being almost 7 feet tall and nearly 5 feet in girth. The fleet he commanded was even more impressive size. It contained over 300 large ocean-going wooden junks manned by more than 28,000 men. And this treasure ship apparently went from China to Japan to Australia, stopping also in the Philippines, and all the way over to India and the Arabian Sea.
Wow.
And it covers all this. It's breathtaking. His prose encompasses that.
No, let me. I want to give. I need a random
You
page.
can take my book in your time. My time is too precious.
Well, who's in charge?
All right, it is your job. I do have some page.
Give me a number from 1 to 100.
89.
89.
128.
We're going to give 89. Here we go. All right. Now, I'm just a random page. People see if they want to listen. The ancient Mongol language would remain purely verbal until Genghis Khan ordered the adoption of the script used by the Uyghur Turks.
Oh, wow.
These were the occupants of the large Xinjiang region of northwest China, which lies to the west of modern Mongolia, separated by the Gobi Desert. I don't think we needed all that information.
Well,
in the original Uyghur script and its Mongol variant, the letters of each word are written from top to bottom vertically in lines of words. These complete lines are then read in sequence from left to right. The anonymous author of The Secret History of the Mongols indicates that it was finished in the year of the mouse.
yes.
Weak.
Now,
Okay.
Chapters like that, the book is resplendent with them, but there's more to just that very paragraph he wrote. That because he ties this in with the Chinese invention of paper and how the use of paper, the invention of paper, enabled the Chinese to write and also promulgate their own sense of history. But what's really interesting is some of the Chinese claims, and he brings this out, to the fact that they believe that China once controlled, as internal parts of their own empire, great swaths of other countries, the Philippines, Japan. That in fact, 90%, they claim that 90% of the Chinese population are descended from the Han's Han culture. And that this is a distinct culture that is unique in all the world. Well, this book, in one paragraph, dispels that. Because the Han dynasty came from the exploits of the Kublai Khan. He conquered the Chinese, and I've got to get this interesting factoid in. He destroyed Beijing. So Beijing, the capital of China, was actually built by the Mongols. And the Great Wall of China, of course, was built as a response to earlier invasions. But Genghis Khan had this rule that you had to, his soldiers had to kill 52 citizens, or they themselves would be killed. So they were responsible for the deaths of over 50,000 in one battle. So,
wow.
And that's a good thing? What do you...
according to no, he doesn't cast any kind of
No judgment.
aspersions. No judgment. It's just facts. But he ties the
I
facts
like people that
into
are-
each of these 10 empires. But basically, his point is that that empire, the difference, he tries to make the distinction, and this is controversial, that empires were just as important in the spread of democracy as small democracies were. And why is that? Because they had such control. And what kind of control did they have? They had administrative control. They invented taxes. They invented the census, which I thought the word census meant to count. I had thought this all my life.
Sure.
According to him, census means to estimate. It's from the Roman word to estimate. And so now why did they estimate? Because they only counted males. They did not count slaves, and they did not count women. And I thought that was an interesting
Boy,
observation.
word origins.
Now, one of the things that he does talk about is that empires gave us calendars, and the use of calendars was a method of control. And he proves this in just a couple paragraphs. And brings it into the Aztec Empire also, in which the Aztecs, their calendar was how many years? Do either of you happen to know?
No idea.
3,200.
Well, 52 years.
Yeah.
And when Cortez
52.
arrived, they were at the end of this fifth cycle, and the Aztecs were actually their sort of priestly
Wait,
class.
the calendar
Was 52
one
years.
calendar was
Yes,
50.
yes.
The cycle.
And there are actual
Yeah.
pages, well, not
Wow.
pages because they're in stelae, but this was something that it took a long, long time before people realized that these plaques were actually calendars of events. But the fifth one was just about over when Cortez came. And so they were filled with, the Aztecs were filled with a sense of dread because they,
They're going
Uncertainty.
to turn the page to a new
Yes.
calendar.
yes,
Yeah.
and what's going to happen to us?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Taxes.
yeah.
Another empires created taxes, which allowed them to control, again, finances. Interestingly enough, at least 5 of these early kingdoms divulged around the importance of floods and the controlling of floods. But what he really did is tie together the myths of beginning. 5 cultures had their beginnings in stories similar to Moses, Romulus and Remus. Moses and China and the Indus civilization. Their founding myths had to do with one child who was the descendant of the gods being put adrift in a basket on a river,
Really?
which floated down because of the floods. So that is a key founding myth, including the Aztec, by the way. I did not know this. They had a founding myth in which the son of a god, because Tenochtitlan nowadays
I'm impressed
was
that you
built
can
on a
pronounce it.
lake,
Wow.
and there was, sure enough, a reef in the center upon which a floating basket carrying a child, a male child, always a male child.
Yeah. Okay, we got to find a civilization with a woman. I just think this is a terrific book.
And then I'll just name one other thing: weights and measures. And the Aztec, and I did not know this, created the idea of a zero.
Oh, I
and
thought it was the Arabians, the Arabs.
Well,
who did that.
They did not think of it as, it was a placeholder only. It was not an actual number.
It was nothing.
Yes. But the Aztecs said 0 was something. The lack of
They
something.
invented nothing.
And But this idea actually came, the Aztec idea cycled back to the Arabian world and the mathematic world in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century,
goodness.
and allowed the algebraic formulas to take into account zero, not as a placeholder, but as a function.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
This is making my brain hurt.
Well, when you give a long row of zeros, what do you got? You still got
A lot of zeros.
zero.
But
Go ahead.
the zero has to have something in front of it to mean anything, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Very good.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so, just very briefly, his ideas of what democracies provide are freedom, that is a sense of individual freedom. And the sense of individual freedom allowed the arts to develop.
Yeah.
This is, of course, a very, very short synopsis of what the arts mean and what.
Yeah.
But whereas the empire and its uniformity allowed the uniformity of the idea that there was a sense of freedom even in an empire. But the freedom of expression, again, was only limited to males. It did not include slaves or females. And the other thing about empires is their brute force.
I don't like that part about
No,
empires.
and that the Aztecs, they had already, by the time Cortes got there, had already overrun most of Mexico. They had nothing left to conquer in their sort of known world. So what did they do? They had to develop ceremonies and rites in which citizens had to be offered as sacrifices, because before then, it was the conquest, and they would take as slaves back and burn them, or even more than burn them. There are actually
I don't want to know.
Okay, you do want to. They would take out the
family-friendly program.
They would take out the heart of the victims and send them rolling down the pyramids, bleeding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So what does this mean?
It means that your time is up.
No, my
And
time
we'll go
is
on further.
You interrupt Susie.
No,
I've got to
no.
finish. It's because I just have one more interesting factoid. That
Is it bloody or?
So that they created more of a civilization. They then no longer they neither castrated nor struck out the hearts of their victims. In the ceremonies, it became a ceremony of flowers. In other words, they brought art into this, what was before a bloody sacrifice. However, he brings in the idea that this was true of Julius Caesar. Now, I did not know this. Julius Caesar brought 100,000 slaves to Rome in order to pay off his debt. And this was, according to our author, the rise of the bread and circus, because Julius Caesar understood that these people had lost their jobs because there were 100,000 slaves who took over all these menial jobs. And he ties this in very briefly, one sentence to the American empire, that what do we have now? We have this problem with immigration because of Julius Caesar. Because he brought 100,000 slaves back to Rome.
I'm having a hard time making that leap, but I want to read the book and find out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you ready, Wayne? Can you carry on from
I
there?
go from here. I can't top it, but it is, does the book club accept slaves for
I don't
payment?
think so.
No. Anyway, this was 2 books from the library. One I got because the author was familiar to me. I really didn't even remember the author by name, but when I read what other books he wrote The Sisters Brothers, and there your puzzled and blank expressions tell me you have a treat in store for you because you didn't read it.
Okay.
It's the Sisters Brothers.
The Sisters Brothers
is a Western. Beyond any Westerns. It takes all the tropes and genres of the Western novel and it turns them upside down and inside out, and it's very, including it's the Sisters Brothers, who would go around riding the West, being tough, named the Sisters brothers, and that's one of the last name is Sisters, and they have adventures, and it's really humorous, and it's a wonderful book, and it's a page turner. An escapist page turner, a novel about the old
yeah,
West.
and what is
Patrick DeWitt?
And this is by Patrick DeWitt, DeWitt. Patrick DeWitt, The Sisters Brothers, and it's really a book that you will read and remember. You don't remember it because you never read it. That's all. Otherwise, you would. This book, I said, well, if he wrote The Sisters Brothers, and I enjoyed it so much, he doesn't keep writing Westerns. It was a one-of-a-kind, one-off thing. This is called The Librarianist, which Professor Hilden will tell us there's no such word. Librarian exists, but not librarianist. Well, librarianist is when you go goofy over libraries. In other words, the fellow's like blinders on to the rest of the world and lives in the library. Almost moves into the library. He's a librarian, and he all his life he's a librarian, and he does things with books. And his wife finally leaves, not finally, pretty quickly, leaves him because he's a librarian. And he has these things about the librarian. Curiously enough, when it was 5 o'clock and time to go home, he really didn't do a lot of reading or anything, but he just was a librarian. And sometimes they don't have any life, much.
What?
That's like the 5-page build-up to the real book. It tells that he didn't have much of a life, and now he retired.
Okay.
Now he retired. And the librarianist has to be, what do I do with my life now? And instead of jumping off the cliff, he has adventures. He goes into a volunteer at a nursing home. This is as exciting as it gets for that guy who retired. But amazingly, I tell you, I won't tell you it, but I'll say that, after some pages, you get to the best surprise you read all year in any book. It just pops out at you.
All
Whoa, that was a surprise.
Putting it on my list.
Is it Top the Midnight Librarian or the Librarian of Paris?
In a different way, but it's very different books. And then he goes on with further. It's like the book. The book and your life suddenly change with this surprise, and you read the rest of it, and it goes on. So I say this is a pretty good book, a free library book, and it's by this fellow who wrote The Sisters Brothers.
And
in
when
fact,
was it
Sisters Brothers was made into a movie, so if you didn't have hours to read the book, you say, I just want to look at the movie for 90 minutes. That's available.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
When was that published? What's the date?
This is like this year.
Okay, that was I was
Yeah,
wondering.
I think it is.
Because there have been a slew of books in the last 3 or 4 years about libraries and librarians.
2023.
Okay.
2023.
Okay.
So you can't. Good. All right. Now then the second book I have, a much heavier book, much bigger book. It's like lots of
How
pages.
many pages, Wayne?
Well, it's over 500, and it's by Walter Isaacson. Now, anybody who watches TV, not just PBS, but almost any station, has seen interviews with snippets with Walter Isaacson, because he did all kinds of other biographies besides Leonardo da Vinci. And Leonardo da Vinci is here. And when I saw the interview that he did on Leonardo da Vinci, I said, this guy knows what he's talking about. He talked very, like what would you call, fluently. And I said, I want to read this guy's book. So I read it, and then it came around, because the part that I enjoyed most in his interview was the last word, Da Vinci's last words, as captured in his notebooks, like when he stopped writing the last page, the last line of his notebook. And he goes into it.
So are you going to tell us what he wrote?
I am.
Oh, good.
That's the best part. And it was the best part for me, the end. In fact, he even made a subtitle called The End. So it's like, and I want to say, it gives a little drumbeat of how the last page, Da Vinci is old, but he's still with it, and he's doing his usual hobby of
writing backwards,
trigonometry, and simultaneously writing backwards and all that. and it says, here it is, and on what may be, this is the only part where we made a leap like of faith or a speculation,
Yes.
but we're happy with him to do that. He says, on what may be the last page he wrote in his notebooks, because all his pages are scattered, and say, that's the one that was last, right?
Okay.
That's okay. That's okay. On what may, it was a page that he wrote, whether it was the last page. On what may be the last page he wrote in his notebooks, Leonardo drew 4 right triangles with bases of differing lengths. It's like a crossword puzzle. He changes the thing a little each time, the 4, to trying to so-called square the circle, as he had done, which you can't do. As he had done obsessively over the years, he was using the visualization of geometry to help him understand the transformation of shapes. This is an old guy who's just on his own, up on the 2nd floor in a little study, nobody bothering him, and what comes to mind, he's not listening to the radio, there was no such, he didn't have a computer, he wasn't at that point reading, he was doing this geometry, then abruptly, almost at the end of the page, he breaks off his writing with an etc. That is followed by a line written in the same meticulous mirror script as the previous lines of his analysis, explaining why he's putting down his pen. Perché la ministra si fredda, he said.
And?
Because the soup is getting cold. He's up on the 2nd floor, and Maria downstairs is saying, come on, the soup is getting cold. And poor, Leonardo da Vinci, the brainstorm of the year, the Renaissance man, is being told he's got to come down.
That's wonderful.
Because he's doing this intelligent stuff, and he's got to go downstairs and eat some minestrone.
I really hope that's
one
the
of the
last
things
page.
I found fascinating about that book, and I can tie it into this one, is his use of the codexes, which had not really been used before, and that he was able to sort of distill all these famous codexes, which were just thoughts that Leonardo wrote down constantly. And he went through them all and created a life of Da Vinci based on these codexes.
So I don't understand what a codex is. What is a codex?
The notebooks.
They're sort of, we think of them in museums now as sort of primary sources, just bunches of facts, but not an actual book. And for instance, in this book, Empire, the Aztecs actually had a form of literature which is based on the Codex Modensis, which was when the Spanish people finally realized that the Aztecs, in a way, had a way of telling their own history, and it was true, just script after script after script of pictures. So they used pictures to tell the story, but he used just individual facts. Whenever he found something, he wanted to know, where was it from? This is Da Vinci. How did it become this? Yeah. And I thought it was a magnificent book. And I thought you were going to tell me why you chose this. It was because I thought you were using my recommendation, because 2 years ago I recommended that book to our listeners.
It was subconscious. But as soon as I saw it on TV, I know. But here, I'm going to ask for the last couple minutes of Susanna's presentation again, that she's going to be able to tell us about a second book, a novel that she's recommending.
All right. This is being taped in January. This is part of a December stack of Christmas books. I got this one. It's called Shadow Child, a novel by Rana Reiko Rizzuto. And it's a mystery. It's the story of 2 twin girls who have a very, very complicated relationship in which sometimes the boundaries blur between who they are. There's definitely a twist, several twists throughout the book. I recommend it as a read you can get immersed in. And that's what I'll have to say about that without revealing too much, except that No, I was going to say I could add a few more hints, but I think this is one to discover as you go.
I'm going to do this with you, and I'll
I'll actually read you the first paragraph.
You do
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Because I love to let the people taste a little bit before they decide are they going to hit that
Okay.
book.
He was a ripple through the stained glass, a dark and shifting shape in an only slightly brighter lobby. It wasn't far from midnight, on the edge of Harlem, and I'd already opened the outer door to my apartment building and was standing in the vestibule when he appeared. Behind me, the street was empty of everything but the occasional used coffee cup and some lazy leaves of newspaper skimming the sidewalk. There was no voice in my head whispering at me to run, not yet. Though the flush creeping beneath my collar was familiar, I was a woman alone, clenching my key between my knuckles. But when the flicker of him reached the heavy iron door handle, I looked away. If I had chosen to stare him down, I would have had some answers for the cop when they asked me. How tall was he? How heavy? What was he wearing? I pulled back against the tiled walls instead. It was my silent deal. I won't see you and you won't see me. That was when he looked at me. Twice. The double take was for Kay. That's her sister. I knew it, even if I could never prove it.
Ah, see, I always believe that novels should begin with a man or a woman or creature, if it was in the wildlife like Bambi, in trouble. And that from the first page has, you know who Andre Dubois, the third,
Yep.
was that a
He was at
matter that we
The playwright?
yeah. And he was going table to table with people's books, and he said, what I'm interested in is what you just read, the first page. And he said to tell whether it's a good book or not. He felt that he could tell within the first page whether it was a book that could be or should be read. You
Let's
can
see
do the
what this
same thing
says.
with this. You got 1 minute.
Oh.
But you've got to go with the, okay, no, we'll get 1 minute.
No, it's not. It's
It
a
doesn't
good paragraph, but it doesn't do what you want it to do.
Okay.
Well, I have always employed, or did when I was younger, I always read in the library or in a bookstore the first paragraph and the last paragraph.
Oh, you did?
Okay.
A
Okay.
spoiler.
Yes, Anna Karenina was one of the ones that I did
Oh,
that
wow.
too, and of course others, because and A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and Anna Karenina. Every a great family is the
right.
same. Or I'm
Except that-
paraphrasing.
yeah.
However, I want to thank you for having me back, Wayne. I
right.
appreciate it, and
It's a
I've
pleasure.
enjoyed our
Yeah. Well,
little coffee hour here.
You remind me, in Hamlet, I always love the fact you can look at the first and last of Shakespeare stuff. Hamlet begins with a sentry to ask the other one, who's there? And then at the very end, it's go bid the soldiers shoot. So you go from one soldier encountering another to another soldier ordering the other soldiers. And you say, wow, that's all, there's war in between.
Time to say farewell.
Thank you, and we'll see you again
Thank you, Wayne.
next time.
Thank you, Susie.
Great.
Good.
Thanks.
Wonderful.
Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Alo Vepi, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Alo Vepi, oho. Suukon kirsikka silmät niin musta.